welcome to this week's review on My Hero Academia. This week I'm reviewing the episode titled The Man Returns, and we kick off this review as we always do with these reviews by talking about the positives, all the things I enjoyed about this particular episode, and the headline positives, all the big things I enjoyed about this episode. And I enjoyed the way that it reintroduced some absent characters, some characters that have been in this series for quite some time. I like the way in which it is able to recontextualise why they are back and justifies that decently well, and it just genuinely feels as though we're starting to build up to something substantial at long last. So, after last week's epic twist and cliffhanger, we're back! We're back before the cliffhanger. Like a few days before, in fact. Okay, sure. Now that's something I could discuss in greater detail later on in the video. I'm sure you can kind of guess where I'm actually going to be with that one. But to speak on things are far more positive, I do have to say that I do like the way in which this episode is able to reintroduce members of the cast whom we haven't seen in quite a long time. Some of them we've not seen in a good few volumes. We see the return of Soga, we see the return of Knuckleduster's daughter, the one that was formerly possessed by B, and of course Knuckleduster himself, who is back. We saw him back last week, but he's back again, albeit at a slightly earlier point in the timeline, but we won't dwell on that just too much in the here and now. Here we have B still being in the hospital for obvious reasons, you know, the whole thing of having the bee parasite in her brain and everything was required to get that out of her, and Soga is there with his crew to keep an eye on her and to bring her out of her shell a little bit more. That isn't the official line, that isn't what we've heard from Knuckleduster, but it's clear that Knuckleduster isn't just having him around for the sake of keeping an eye on her. It feels like he's been brought there to try and bring her back. Knuckleduster has more of an idea as to who Soga really is deep down. I think he has a good eye for that kind of person, and he thinks that Soga would be the best mechanism in which to get his daughter to come out of her shell and to just be more of a person. Like the pair of them don't need to make amends. She doesn't need to make amends with her father, but he's at least taking steps to make sure that she can heal enough to have her own life, even if that is a life separate from his. Sure, a lot of that character motivation is something that I've read into their actions, and hey, maybe the reason that Soga is there really is just to keep an eye on her. I don't know, but I get the feeling that if he was just there for the sake of keeping an eye on her, and given what we know of B, well, their name isn't really B, but we'll call them B and Knuckleduster's past relationship, yeah, I don't think if he was just there for the sake of keeping an eye on her, Knuckleduster would be all that happy about hearing him slag him off all the time. Because, I mean, he's hardly self-conscious, certainly not from what we've seen of him over the past few volumes, but all at the same time, he isn't short-sighted and dumb enough to just let these kind of things fly, let these kind of things slip by. He's not as dumb as he looks. He plots things out, he plans things out well in advance and well ahead of time, and this does feel like it's more of a mechanism which, like I say, to help his daughter heal mentally, more so than it's necessarily a case of, okay, keep your eye on my daughter, I'm going to beat up drug dealers, which, you know, I guess that's what he's been doing on the side, in addition to just keeping an eye on his family as best as he can do. Now, I will admit, when I started to read this particular episode, I wasn't sure when it was taking place. I thought that we're just having like a side scene, like a little bit that's over at current time Japan, or maybe a couple minutes either way, and this is a scene with B, and we're getting a chance to check in on her, what's going on with her since we've last seen her, and then we shift back into the action, kind of as is expected with a moment like that. But we've seen this cliche in other serialized action stories and other action movies before. We'd have two characters talking and someone would say something along the lines of, "Oh boy, I wonder where Dad is," and then immediately it'll cut to the father get into a fight, or, "Oh gee, I wonder what Mom's up to, she's been gone a real long time," and then they'll be there shooting people trying to steal the diamond and stop people stealing the diamond depending on what it is, and you get the idea. We've seen this trope time and time and time again. But that isn't the case here. This is just all taking place before everything that happened with Hong Kong, which, again, we'll talk about that shortly. I mean, I find the whole scene with Soga and his friends and the villain formerly known as B to be fine. I mean, it's neat to see Soga and his friends just kind of chilling, acting normal. It's almost wholesome in a way, and it almost makes you forget about the time that he tried to pop step. I mean, even putting that history to one side, it's really just feels like a rather odd way to try and rework and rebrand his character, as if nothing else, there's been no major steps really been made to develop his character to any discernible degree, or indeed any steps at all to develop him in any great degree. He's been absent from this series for so long that, whilst we did have a great episode a few volumes ago which really helped to give us an idea as to who he was and why he is the way that he is, he's not been seen since, and we're not seeing hide nor hair of him since that episode, and since that great insight into what he was, and all just the brilliant way in which it was put together within the manga itself. Just the way that it was presented, the panel work and the artistry there was just top notch. But we've had nothing whatsoever since then with him, and jokes aside, what we get in this particular episode is small stuff. He's acting aloof, he's trying to seem not interested, he's trying to seem like a cool dude, and that's just about it. Bearing in mind again his past history, you kind of just go, okay, we'll see where we're all going to go with this, but it would be nice at the very least to see him get developed a lot more, to see his character and to who he truly is be brought out a lot more, to get an understanding as to why he, more of an idea as to why he is the way that he is. Because like I say, that episode that we got a few volumes ago where we just saw what a difficult upbringing that he had and how he effectively found himself falling into criminality purely and simply because of the happenstance of his quirk, is something that I think is a great theme. I think it is something that is very much in keeping within the main series itself, but at the same time I'd still like to see more of it. I like to see more of these characters, see how they evolve and change into how you then are able to then reconcile what he nearly did to Popstep right in the first episode of this series. But we'll see where we go with this. I mean, given how this series has been hanging out thus far, I'm not sure how we'll go with this. I've got this sinking suspicion that, much like the prior volume, we're not really going to get that many episodes to develop him whatsoever, and he's just going to be here for maybe an episode or half an episode, and that's just about it. Sure, the scene itself, aside from that, is fine enough. There's a fun little bit of bands, a few little gags here and there. It's a decent scene for what it is, but again, certain characters' past actions, it kind of spoils the tone and what they're particularly wanting to go for on this particular scene. But still, this is an episode that does give us greater context as to how Knuckleduster ended up getting involved with the mission in Hong Kong. I say we get greater insight and greater context. It isn't that deep. They don't really go all that overboard with this. It's just the police using him as a means to investigate something that's way beyond their jurisdiction. Look, I know that this is a superhero world, and as such, laws are going to be different here, but I'm not sure that sending a random citizen to another country to investigate alleged criminal activity is all that legal. I mean, I'm no legal expert, I'm not going to pretend to be, but it feels like we're entering into a very, very grey area here that tends to lean more on the dark side. But look, I know that I shouldn't think about it too much, as usually when I tend to think about these scenes, it's either because A, this is a setting that has a distinct grounding to it that makes the world and its mechanics feel rational and, quote, realistic, despite it being sometimes a rather fantastical and mystical, wonderful world. I mean, this is still a superhero series, but great strides have been taken both within this series and the main series itself to have a logic and have a rationale and have mechanics to this world to make it feel a lot more grounded and a lot more normal and mundane in certain regards than other similar superhero series. And as such, what we end up seeing ends up going against that to some degree or another. And the other reason why I tend to pick out on these things is because I'm not engaged with the material, and as such my mind starts to wander and I'm less willing to suspend my disbelief. And this week it is both those things. This is a series that, like I say, has taken great steps to make itself feel realistic, to make it feel as though there is a genuine through line of logic here. We need to remember that it was only a few volumes ago that we learnt the origin of the whole quirk hero licensing system, that we went into depth through that. Not major, like, analytical anal depth, but still of a level of depth that you wouldn't have got from other series. And now we're suddenly getting to a point where we're just looking the other way to some rather dodgy legal activity. It feels odd, and I'd be more willing to forgive this, and I use the word forgive intensely loosely if this was some mid to late 2000s post 9/11 piece of fiction where our characters doing this kind of thing was a hell of a lot more common. We had a similar kind of sequence in The Dark Knight. This was like every other episode of 24 or Prison Break or just about any other action slash espionage show or movie of that era where our characters have to go off books to get a little extrajudicial to get things done because they're a maverick, and it always works out with no negative consequences whatsoever. And if it does, then it just means our main character disappears at the end of the season and everyone looks kind of scared. You get one, maybe the love interest looking forlorn, staring off to the middle distance as Jack Bauer or whomever disappears, and then next series you just see them and they've got like maybe a slight cut above their head that's supposed to represent the fact they've had the 7 bells knocked out of them by whichever intelligence agency they're pissed off. But hey, that's a rant and discussion for a whole other time, baby. But still, the counter to the fact this all feels very, very fucking stupid and very fucking weird is that Knuckleduster is a maverick. He is a vigilante. He exists outside the law, so there is a certain plausible deniability here. And it does, to be fair, go some way to do a little bit of world building, that the police are using the vigilantes to go to places that they can't, and places that genuine, like apple pie, let's all save the day superheroes wouldn't do out of principle. He's going and cracking skulls and beating people up for the police because they can't. They have due process to follow, which, you know, all of this is a fascinating and slightly horrifying idea, which is an idea that I really don't think this series is really going to explore to any great depth whatsoever. I mean, the stuff that we got with Lane and Gant within the main series, that was as close as we were getting to this kind of material, and even then they didn't dwell on it too much. As great and as grim as it was, they didn't really go that far with it, and for this, I think this is about as deep as we're going into this. This is going to have as much depth and exploration into this idea as Death Wish 3 for what it's worth. And maybe if they do, I'll give them credit for it, but I've got a feeling that this is as much as we're going to get, and once again, this is a case of many moments of fluff with maybe occasionally moments of substance, but hey, that's a rant for another thing. I shouldn't be so pessimistic at the start of a volume, but hey, yo, I think I've seen this one before. Now, enough talk about Knuckleduster and weird legal stuff and how Soga's still a shit. Let's talk about Crawler. Let's talk about Crawler, because this is his life story, occasionally. Like, you know, in the last episode where you had that really fun joke and sequence where he was being chased by the guy with the Thomas the Tank Engine head? Well, this week, we're doing it again! Albeit with a different cartoon train guy. I presume that this is a character from Japanese television, because I've got no fucking idea who the hell this is supposed to be. It's a cross between a train and a dog. I'm sure that I'm going to get many angry comments down on the comment section down below about how much it's a beloved series and how big it is in Japan, and maybe we should import it over here because it's so much fun and amazing stuff. But still, you know, my big takeaway from this is, one, I'm disappointed by the fact they've redone this joke a second time, and two, I really hope that this is a chance for, well, something to happen with Crawler. Like, I hope I hope the fact that now Crawler has been chased by 2 villains with the same power and same power level in such relative proximity to one another, timeline-wise and hell, location-wise, would give him the inspiration for him to start to investigate and try and discover what's really going on here, and not spend his time just farting about in the background and letting every other character in this goddamn series do all the detective work, all the hero work, all the character development, and generally be a far more proactive presence within the series, where he just spends most of his time in this thing looking like a startled cod. Like, I hope that this is the moment, well, maybe not this specific moment, maybe in this volume, he starts to take a bit more action, he actually starts to act a little bit more like a vigilante, or a hero, or indeed just like a protagonist. Like, I don't want to get into the negative section prematurely, but he is feeling like his purpose in this is just be a comic relief. But it's supposed to be his own life story, so he's comic relief in his own life story? What the fuck is this, the Joker? Jesus Christ. But still, what I will say to pivot us back to the positives, it does feel as though something substantial is starting to happen again, if purely and simply for the fact that we now have Knuckleduster in here, and we have more of an effort to try and contextualise and to build that stuff out a lot more, to give it more of a sense of grounding, a little bit more of a through line of the logic as to why the hell did they just decide to get this random guy whose superpower is just to punch people really, really hard. well, it's not a superpower, I'm just being literal, he's all that he can do at this point. He just punch people really, really hard, and why they went for him and not, say, a superhero that actually has superpowers. I like the fact we're getting a little bit more of a context into that, and it feels as though now we're going to get into the moment where we're going to start to see what happened next in Hong Kong, and thereafter we're going to get to a point where we have just a better idea as to what's happening in this world more generally, that this whole criminal conspiracy is going to be explored a lot more, that maybe, just maybe, Crawler will actually do something for once in this goddamn series. Whether or not that'll be the case, I don't know, but bearing in mind the next episode is seemingly a Christmas episode, I'm a little bit skeptical as to whether or not that's going to be the case. I honestly, genuinely, hand on heart hope that something more substantial is going to start happening now, and we're going to start having it for more than the sake of an episode or two, or maybe an episode and a half, as it generally feels as though this series has been getting into. With negativity being in the air, sadly, let's get into the negatives. And I will be blunt, I can't say that I like the fact that we've gone back in time with this. Like I said previously, I could have appreciated it if this was just a flashback to, oh, this is why he's here, and then we get back into it. Or this was that scene, like I said, where, oh, I wonder what Daddy's up to. Then you cut to him getting into a fight, and then you go from there. Like, getting context as to why this stuff happened is fine. Seeing these characters again is fine. But there's this part of me that can't help but wonder, why? Why are we going back to see these characters now? Why are we here to get this much context for what has just happened here? Bearing in mind that the whole context stuff could have been done at any other point so long as this is happening. You could have started this episode off with Knuckleduster getting into the fight, and then a brief little scene where he's talking to the police officer to get the context as to, oh, why he went off to Hong Kong and why he was the one that was selected to do it. But that's not really the case here. We're just back where we were, like, I don't know, a matter of hours or days before it happened. We jumped back in time, and I don't really understand why. Did the writers feel as though they jumped too far ahead, and they decided, okay, we'll get back to that later, even though what we're having instead of it might not amount to much of a muchness? Because I don't know what's happening next in this volume. I genuinely don't, but I am of an honest, wholehearted opinion that maybe this is going to be another 8 or 7 episodes that's going to be mostly what we would otherwise call as filler. Like, there may be some stuff inside here that will become more relevant as we go forward, but even still, there's a part of me that can't help but feel as though we're getting short-changed here. Like, we were promised a big action sequence in the previous episode, and now we're not getting into that, because now we need to learn as to why Knuckleduster was chosen to do this in the first place, which, come to think about it, is the exact same problem that we had with the bloody Mixer mini-arc from last volume, where we had 2 episodes of something that wasn't really much of a muchness. Then we had to have an episode to explain why it was important. Then we got into the stuff with Hong Kong, and now we're having another episode as to explain why it was in Hong Kong. Like, do this stuff ahead of time. Lead into this stuff. Tell us this stuff ahead of time. Build into it rather than building into it after the fact. For goodness sake. You've been doing this better up until this moment. Please, goodness sake. With that said, however, let's get into the overview. And I have to say is that despite my misgivings, it's a fine start to a volume, but it doesn't have really much momentum behind it. I appreciate the time has been taken to build this up, but I really wanted more. And I will be blunt, there's only a certain point within all of this that I can sit here and go, okay, I shouldn't be saying this, I should review what is here in front of me. But even what we have in front of me, it's not much of a muchness. Again, it's fine as the opening episode of a volume. Like, if this was the first episode of a new season, it would be forgivable. But even still, with that said, to go from the big epic cliffhanger of the last episode to this, where it's context which is appreciated but not really necessary, and our main character farting about with the same gag that we had from last week or the last series or whatever that you're looking at this, I don't think that's substantial. I really don't. Now, I honestly, again, I hope that things are going to start turning around, because I'm starting to lose a bit of patience with this series at this moment. I genuinely am, because it's feeling like we're getting a lot of stuff which is just rather weak and lackluster. Our character isn't doing anywhere near as much as a protagonist should be doing, regardless of whether it's manga, anime, or anything. Like, this is the most unproactive protagonist I've seen in a very long time, and I hope that things can improve from here on out. I genuinely do, because we're only a few weeks away, relatively speaking, from the main series, for this new series kicking off. And given just how faithful manga and anime adaptations are of manga, Christ on a bike, Oh my god, I hope this is going to be the turning point, at least this volume at some point, or at the very least a good 2 or 3 episode run where Crawler is actively doing stuff, and then maybe we can get back into stuff at Hong Kong. We'll soon see about where all that's concerned. Between now and then, let's get to Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner, and once again we have Big X1 who says, and this is of course referring to the previous episode that I did, my previous review, which was the Volume 6 review, and this week we have Big X1 saying, this volume was fine, but things pick up from the next one. Thank you for your comment, and I really hope so, because, look, whilst it has been a few days since I read this week's episode and did my review, I'm still of a persuasion that feels that this episode was a colossal disappointment, and I really want to see what's coming next. I want things to pick up because I do enjoy this series, and I don't want to break off from it because it just feels as though it's going through the motions and it isn't really doing anything of great substance. I want our protagonist to be proactive. I want to see him doing stuff and being part of the main action rather than just someone who's constantly at the side of everything, which we'll soon see where all that goes. The next episode is supposed to be like a Christmas special thing, so at the very least I hope that he can at least do something Christmas related, even though it's not really going to be that seasonal for us. Though with that said, when that review comes out, it's going to be on the 25th of January, exactly 1 month from Christmas. Well, last Christmas. We've still got another 11 months until the next one, but we'll see where we go. But anyway, thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!